Fuck around, make my 40 pop.
Boruto episode 207 review. Alright guys, this episode right here was absolutely insane. The best way I could kind of describe this episode was unnecessarily fire. It didn't have to be this fire, but it was either way, and I'm definitely not going to be complaining. Now, the first thing that I definitely do want to talk about has to be BoruShiki. BoruShiki coming into this episode was probably like one of the most hyped things. Of course, secondarily was CHIDORI, but the biggest overall question was if BoruShiki was actually going to have the Jogan. Now, I was a very big proponent of saying that I really wanted BoruShiki to actually have the Jogan, but it turns out that BoruShiki actually has the byakugan. Now, I did say this in my prior video, if BoruShiki actually had the byakugan, it wouldn't necessarily be a very big deal. Someone in comments actually said BoruShiki entering this form when Momoshiki takes over is going to be his dojutsu, but when Boruto enters the second stage of the Karma Seal, it's probably going to be a Jogan, which I completely agree with. The overall aura of BoruShiki was through the roofs. We all knew what BoruShiki was going to bring to the table, and of course we got that legendary quote from the god BoruShiki himself. He says, "Don't get cocky, you inferior creatures," bro. Bro, just the overall aura of BoruShiki, the best way I could describe it is, yo, BoruShiki is one of them ones, bro. He's just one of them ones, bro. But we're gonna talk a lot about BoruShiki in the upcoming week. The first thing that I do want to get to about this episode has to be Sarada in this episode. Sarada in this episode did exactly what she was supposed to do. The CHIDORI, the first time she actually did it in a battle, was at one of the most clutchest moments of Team 7's life. Like, literally, they're all on the brink of death, and Sarada actually pulls this out, which is absolutely insane. I mean, if you even look back at when Sasuke did it for the first time, he was in the tuning exam, and there was almost no pressure on Sasuke. Now, of course, there was some level of pressure on Sasuke, mainly because Sasuke was fighting one of the strongest characters in the whole series at that particular time, but Gaara was a stationary target. Like, he was just sitting in a sand cocoon or a sand ball, and my man Sasuke didn't necessarily have to worry about him actually dodging the shot. But Sarada in this situation did not have that luxury. She was coming in not necessarily blind, but she didn't necessarily know which moves that Boro was actually going to make. And I really love how Boruto set this whole thing up, which is another thing that they didn't really add in the Boruto manga. And that's another thing, by the way, this episode right here was miles ahead of chapter 42. There's a lot of anime only things that happened in this episode that just took this episode to the next level. And of course, it wasn't just the overall fighting scenes, it was also the comedy within everything. Of course, there was one time when everybody was saying, "Hey, I'm gonna protect Naruto too, I'm gonna protect Naruto," and then Mitsuki comes out of nowhere like, "Hey, I'm gonna protect you, Boruto." One of the other things that we thought was going to be a very good possibility was that right before Sarada did actually use the CHIDORI, she would gain the third tomo in her eyes. This has pretty much been like a huge topic amongst a lot of the Sarada fans out there, is the fact that during this time in the Boruto manga, Sarada actually has her third tomo. And while I was talking about the spoilers of this fight, I was very free talking about how she did have the third tomo, because I understood that there was definitely going to be a very good possibility that she actually did not have the third tomo in this fight, and it turns out that she actually did not have the third tomo in this fight. So the biggest thing moving forward at this particular point is going to be Sarada being on Sharingan watch. Literally every single fight that Sarada is in, every single emotional scene that Sarada is in, we're automatically going to be expecting her to get her third tomo, because as I said, as of right now in the Boruto manga, she has her third tomo. I think one of the biggest things that the Boruto writers didn't necessarily want to omit at this particular point was Sarada actually having an emotional connection to unlocking the third tomo. If you guys do recall, when she did unlock her second tomo, she was actually in a very emotional state, fighting against another member of the Kata organization insiders. So again, at this particular time, it's really only a matter of time. Now, Boro in this episode was very impressive. One of the things that we do know about Boro is that he's a very slow villain, probably the slowest villain of the Kata insiders. There were a lot of scenes in this episode where Boro was literally not moving. He was just sitting stationary and just throwing blows with Team 7, which is impressive in itself, but it just shows you how slow this man really is. Now, not only that, I think his regenerative abilities has to be probably the best regenerative abilities that we've ever seen in the series of Naruto. There was one scene where his arm got completely chopped off, I believe by Kawaki, and before his arm hit the ground, he swings at Boruto with that same arm because it already regenerated. Like, literally, this man regenerates his arm in a fraction of a second. Now, I'm gonna say we have to 100% give it up to Team 7, mainly because Boro is a very tricky character. I think a lot of people, even from the OG Naruto or from like the Naruto Shippuden cast, some very strong people would actually lose to Boro, mainly because they're just going in blind. If ninjas are coming in and attacking Boro with no knowledge of his actual abilities, it's going to be a very difficult scene, and Team 7 came in with no prior knowledge and they still ended up beating Boro, which is a very insane feat in itself. And that right there just highlighted the teamwork of this new Team 7. And again, I always say this, like the Boruto writers can't go a couple of episodes without slandering Konohamaru, but the teamwork in this episode was absolutely impeccable. Even without their leader Konohara, which technically he is still the leader even though Sarada was named the quote-unquote captain. There was multiple combination attacks. There's a lot of non-verbal communication, and I'm not necessarily sure they might be trading off screen, but I'm pretty damn sure in the Boruto anime we haven't necessarily seen them work on a lot of pretty much any of these things in combination with each other. I think one of the best examples of this has to be the ending scene when Sarada actually does use the CHIDORI. This right here was impeccable on so many levels. First things first, Boruto charges Boro, basically gets him running forward. He throws some smoke bombs, and then he uses a Rasengan, a vanishing Rasengan, just puts it right in front of him, knowing that Boro is going to run right into the vanishing Rasengan, and that it would catch Boro off guard to the point where he'd actually have to stop. That happens 100% to Boruto's plan. Boruto jumps in the air because he's already anticipating Sarada coming from the back with the CHIDORI. Mind you guys, Boruto has rarely ever seen the CHIDORI and knows what it could possibly do and knows how fast Sarada can actually move with the CHIDORI. But even without that prior knowledge, Boruto just jumps up and almost at perfect timing, Sarada comes right off of the back of Boruto and completely destroys Boro. This right here was like pinnacle teamwork in my personal opinion. And of course, this right here is even more realistic because it's Boruto and Sarada. They had pretty much been working together for almost 6 years at this particular point. But it just still just shows you how well they work together. Not only that, Mitsuki and Kawaki had some combination attacks in this episode as well. Boruto and Mitsuki had some combination attacks in this episode as well. And one of the things that I definitely do want to point out is that the power scale is going to be eating good off of this fight. A lot of actual fans don't necessarily pay attention to this, but there's a lot of things in this episode that pretty much made you understand or pretty much had you pick up on a lot of power scaling. I'll just drop a couple of jewels for you guys right here in this episode. First things first, Kawaki's defensive capabilities is completely next level. He tanked a direct explosion and was still standing right in front of Naruto's seal and was still like responding to people and still talking. Mitsuki got hit with the same attack and he actually fell to the ground and was out cold. Now remind you guys, Mitsuki's defensive capabilities are up there, but that just shows you how different Kawaki is. And we also seen in an early episode when Kawaki completely tanked a Rasengan. Now not only that, there was also a certain situation where we found out how slow Kawaki's actual blast can potentially be. There was a situation where Kawaki was standing farther from Boro, and we understand that Boro is extremely slow. He tried to hit Boro with the blast and Boro actually dodged it. So that pretty much tells you at a long distance range, Kawaki's blast is kind of slow, but if he's point blank, you're pretty much dead. Now the last thing I do want to talk about has to be Boro's final form. This right here looked absolutely insane. This guy right here is pretty much like Broly-esque. Like he pretty much went in full rampage mode, strong as hell, destroying everybody, pretty much wiped Team 7 in a matter of like, I don't know, like, oh, it is 15-20 seconds or something like that. This guy Boro is a completely different breed. And of course, this right here is a time when BoruShiki popped up and uttered the legendary words, "Don't get cocky, you inferior creature." This episode right here is arguably a masterpiece, dogs. But let me know what you guys think and give me your opinions about BoruShiki. Do you guys like the fact that he does it? Oh, one of the biggest things I almost found. How did I forget about this? The best thing about BoruShiki, in my personal opinion, is that they're using Boruto's voice and also Momoshiki's voice and they're mashing it together. That right there, in my personal opinion, is absolutely perfect. That right there is exactly what they needed to do. But let me know what you guys think about BoruShiki's form in the comment section below. I'm super happy about it. Even though they don't necessarily have the Joker, I'm still super happy. Let me know what you guys think. It's been your boy Baara B, and we out.
It's a knife.